Well, thanks for joining us for our latest installment of our small group study. We're going to be talking about Hezekiah today and his reign as king over the southern kingdom, and he is one of the good kings, and we'll see what we can learn from his life. Would you mind reading for us?
Yeah, 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 1. In the third year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places and broke the pillars and cut down the Asherah, and he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. It was called Nehushtan. He trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him. For he held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept the commandments that the Lord commanded Moses. And the Lord was with him. Wherever he went, he prospered. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He struck down the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city.
Okay, so one of the things that it seems like is a refrain throughout Kings and Chronicles is that if you're a good king, you break down the high places, you reform worship, and especially if you're a really good king, you do something to restore the temple itself. So if we were looking at a modern description of a good king, if we were to look at a history book or something like that, I don't think we would see that. What kinds of things would we see in a modern history book to describe a good king or a good ruler, a good president?
I'm sure we'd see some sort of military conquest and financial prosperity, but it would probably be fairly a-religious in nature.
Okay, so we might even see, if we're lucky, something about justice or passing laws about justice. So why does the Bible kind of give us this picture of worship reform as kind of like the key ingredient of a king being good or bad?
I mean, this is kind of the foundation, though, right? The foundation of all those things comes down to worshiping the right God. And if you mess that one up, you're going to mess the rest up too. And you can try and have those other things without that foundation, but again, like some of the other things we've talked about in some of these studies, that there's no permanence there.
Okay, so why might worship reform be something that the Bible would highlight over, say, justice for the oppressed or something like that?
It's one of those things. I think it highlights that there's a focus to make God the most important thing and to put him at the top of the hierarchy. And it's not that, worrying about justice for the oppressed or anything is a bad thing. In fact, God tells, I think, Solomon that's part of his responsibility and stuff like this. But again, the chief thing, though, is putting God in his place, honoring him for who he is. And the other things that are supposed to be right in your kingdom are kind of supposed to flow from that.
Okay, so why might it be more effective for a king to, say, worry more about the temple and worship than to, get the legislature in for a special session to pass all the right laws about financial reform or the economy or anything like that?
You're changing the hearts of the people rather than just trying to legislate to the people. If people have a sincere desire to do good, that's always going to be better than people who are just compelled to be good because of the threat of punishment.
Yeah, I think that's a big oversight in our modern culture, is we feel like that the answer to everything is to pass the right laws, not understanding that that can be very ineffective. If we look back at, say, Prohibition, they were looking for a term. I think it was a newspaper was looking for a term for the people who broke the law against alcohol. It was incredibly common, and one reader came up with scofflaw as the term, and it's been a term that's been used ever since, because the phenomenon is very common, which is if you pass a law that nobody really likes, nobody's really going to follow it. So what might be some of the downsides to passing laws that aren't in the hearts of the people, other than the fact that they won't follow them?
Other than them, they're not followed?
Yeah. Well, what are some of the side effects of laws largely going unfollowed?
well, lawlessness is not a good thing in people and stuff like this. I know in our own country, there's, uh, uh, we think we have fairly large police forces, but we really have fairly small ones. And if even, they estimate that if you only had like 3, 4, 5% of the population who was, actively trying to usurp the laws of this country and stuff like that, that it would reign absolute chaos. So having a people that does not want to follow any laws uh, uh, is definitely not a recipe for a good, a kingdom that makes progress in anything.
Yeah, it seems to me to be very short-sighted to think that there wouldn't be a general attitude change toward the law that would bleed into other areas, and then even to the respect for the ruler.
I was going to say
themselves.
for the lawgiver, yeah.
and so there's all kinds of problems with our modern approach of we'll just pass more laws, pass more laws, pass more laws, and so Hezekiah is rightly, I think, regarded as a good king because the focus of what he does seems to be, especially at the beginning of the description here, to reform the worship and get it back to where it needs to be. Now, so there are some political and cultural ramifications that we've discussed, but from the standpoint of the covenant with God, in telling the whole story that begins at the beginning of the Bible and ends in Revelation, well, it seems to me that God is about something in the world, and that something might be a little bit bigger than Hezekiah having a good reign and Israel being strong. So trying to see how what Hezekiah is doing and his purposes fit into that larger desire that God has for the world might be worth thinking about.
So looking at, God is the supreme good in anything, right? I'd like to say in the universe, but he's beyond the universe. But he's the supreme good in existence. How about we say it that way? And it's funny, recognizing that as such is not a bad thing, and it's not and God wanting us to recognize that as such is not a prideful thing on his part. Not recognizing it would actually be a bad thing, and you might say even maybe possibly the worst thing. And, so Hezekiah taking on these worship reforms that hopefully are going to allow people within his own realm, but hopefully even beyond his realm, to see the goodness of God and appropriately worship him. Definitely, not just within his own time, but possibly beyond and later, give all of humanity a better regard for who God is and what he's about.
God's desire is not only to create everything that exists, but to glorify everything that exists. And really worshiping him and obeying him is really just participation in our own glorification. And that glory that we achieve is not only good for us, but it's good for everything around us. You can think about going into a house that's beautiful but comfortable, and that you can think about living in Detroit, growing up in the streets of Detroit versus growing up here. You know what I'm saying? Like the effect that has on you. I was just watching a video about Seattle, and there's just everywhere you look, there's garbage. There's people engaged in open drug use. There's in the recent days, several people have been attacked, stabbed, hit with baseball bats, thrown downstairs. Just random people as they walk downtown. If you had to grow up in that kind of an environment, things would be different for you. And so it's interesting to me that God's desire is for our glory, and really what Hezekiah is doing is he's drawing Israel into that, which has profound, great effects, beautiful effects for not only for them, but for the world around them.